have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
Welcome to Gay USA. I'm Andy Hum.
I'm Ann Northrup.
And in the news this week, today or yesterday, the Senate confirmed yet another out gay big appointment in the Biden administration. And we're going to remember Bob Dole on LGBTQ issues.
Not fondly. There's a heartbreaking story from Tennessee about a bullied 12-year-old.
On Long Island, a 74-year-old former teacher was arrested for at least a decade of threats to LGBTQ leaders and groups.
And we have a blockbuster story about Little House on the Prairie and who wrote those books.
Okay. We mourn the loss of out gay actor extraordinaire, Antony Sher.
A gay bar in the Ukraine was attacked by a gang of about 20 neo-Nazis.
I thought the Russians were going to invade. Now it's the Nazis. Chile's Congress.
What's the difference?
Correct. Chile's Congress passed marriage equality, and Canada banned conversion therapy.
But 6 Middle East nations have banned the new West Side Story film because of its LGBTQ inclusions.
All right. We are going to bring you the World AIDS Day speech by gay and AIDS activist and longtime friend and Gay USA viewer, Shep Wahnon, a moving story of his survival and his thriving.
Jeopardy champ Amy Schneider is still at it. They're on a break for a separate professors tournament at the moment. She'll be back in about a week and a half. But she has explained how Shakespeare triggered her understanding of herself as transgender.
And we're going to review Maggie Gyllenhaal's directorial debut, The Lost Daughter, starring Olivia Colman, which Ann and I saw this week.
Yeah, based on an Elena Ferrante novel, not from the...
do we have any time left?
We better.
Okay. All right. So for the first time, the Senate confirmed an out gay as the U.S. Customs and Border Protection Commissioner. There he is, Chris Magnus. He's been the police chief in Tucson. He stood with the Black Lives Matter movement a couple of years ago, and the vote was 50-47. One Republican, Susan Collins, voted for him. The party, of course, Magnus has been critical of Trump's immigration policies. I hope so.
Which is why all the Republicans, except Susan Collins, voted against him. They think he's going to be too soft on immigration.
And then everybody heard about the passing of Bob Dole this week, former Senate Majority Leader. There he for president in 1996, the Republican nominee against Bill Clinton, losing, of course, to him. He had a resolutely anti-gay voting record, but he did guide the Americans with Disabilities Act through. He was a disabled veteran, or a veteran with disabilities, and he earlier voted for the Civil Rights Act of 1964. I mean, he was 98 years old. But that, of course, that latter legislation, and he voted for Voting Rights Act, which was gutted by Republican judges, and yet he still endorsed Donald Trump for president.
He also rejected a donation check from the log cabin Republicans on the grounds that would be, too much for his party to accept. And then he sort of admitted later that he thought it was bad that he rejected the check, but it was a mess. Meanwhile, he was very bad on AIDS issues in spite of having created the Americans with Disabilities Act. And my favorite moment of interaction was walking up to him on a sidewalk in D.C. and handing him a gay men's health crisis safer sex pamphlet with many pictures of naked penises and condoms. And
didn't he do Viagra ads?
Yes, he did.
So did he accept them? Did he accept your material, and did he like it?
He took it and handed it off to an aide. I did not have the pleasure of his actual reaction.
I encountered him in a press gaggle at the convention where he was nominated. All of a sudden, he was in a hallway and everybody surrounded him. And so I got my question and I said, Mr. Dole, is there any place for gay people in the Republican Party? And he glares at me and he goes, maybe somewhere.
A closet somewhere. He was not a nice guy. But he did some good things and some horrible things, but nothing great for us.
Okay.
A footnote to the Supreme Court arguments on the abortion case. Billie Jean King wrote a piece for the Washington Post about her abortion. We thank her for that. That comes from the time many years ago when all this was, when Roe v. Wade was being decided, and all these feminists came out and wrote about their abortions.
And Biden's commission on reforming the court is not going to move the ball at all. That's up to the Congress. People have to move on that. We need a more balanced court. And, you know, we did.
They didn't recommend anything.
Yeah. I think they recommended term limits, but that has to be done by the Constitution. Expanding the court can be done by the Congress. Sharon McGowan of Lambda said that Lawrence and Obergefell, the sodomy and marriage decisions, were built on the foundation of Roe and Casey, the other abortion decision, and the court's reproductive rights cases. So it's all in trouble. All these things are on the line. Everything is on the line now. I mean, I listened to the Supreme Court decision, the arguments today, and Carson v. Macon, which is this Maine case to give funding to religious schools, which if they're a sectarian religious school, Maine doesn't want to do it. If they're just like, you know, preaching anti-gay stuff and whatever, and the Supreme Court is totally disposed, oh, that's their freedom of religion, that's their freedom of speech. We're in trouble.
There are counties in Maine with no public schools, and that plays into this.
I drove across that state once. It's a vast, empty place.
It's a wonderful, vast, empty place, and we appreciate that.
Yeah, we do.
Beautiful place. I've spent a fair amount of time there. All right, let's move on to education. We do have to whip through some stories today. In Minnesota, the Marshall School District demoted and forced out a 16-year middle school principal, Mary Kay Thomas, because she put up a rainbow flag in the cafeteria among many other flags representing many countries and cultures, and that was just too much for the locals, and they forced her out, and now she's suing. Good for her.
Minnesota has civil rights protections for our people, so why not?
Yeah. In Colorado, the University of Colorado has created something called the Colorado Athletics Visibility Award. They're giving full tuition scholarships to those who promote LGBTQ plus visibility and inclusion. The woman on the right is a lesbian athlete. The guy on the left is also an athlete. I'm not sure that he is LGBTQ, but he is supportive. And this is the first time any place has done anything like this.
In Queens, New York, gay activist Tarlik McNeilis, who died of COVID last April, gay and Irish activist, they named the junction of 49th Street and 43rd Avenue was named in his honor. That was presided over out council member Jimmy Van Bramer, who worked with him for 30 years. He was a driving force behind LGBTQ inclusion in St. Patrick's Day parades, and he managed a project in Queens for people with learning disabilities, and he was a terrific guy.
Yes, a well-deserved honor. In Iowa, at Spirit Lake High School, after 2 years of using the boys' restroom, trans male Ethan Stucker has been barred from doing so after one complaint from a parent. He is refusing to back down. He said, I'm not going to stand for this. I've been using it. I'm going to keep using it. Here is a local story.
The last year and a half, Ethan Stucker has used the men's restroom here at Spirit Lake High School. But earlier this week, he was called in and told that was going to change. Stucker is a senior who has spent all his high school years at Spirit Lake. He identifies as transgender and has used the corresponding restroom for more than a year and a half. But he says something changed suddenly this week.
School has allowed transgender students to use the bathroom that they identify with, or at least me, for the past couple years with no problems, and then all of a sudden a couple days ago I was called into the office to talk to the guidance counselor, and they said if I continue to use the bathrooms that I will be disciplined for that.
Jennifer Larson says she's tried to get an explanation about her son from school officials, but the most she got was that someone or some people were upset.
I was not aware that there was any issue prior to them calling Ethan in, and after the fact, Ethan called me from school and he was crying and very upset.
School officials declined our interview requests, but they did provide this statement. It reads, "We are investigating the current regulations and are sensitive to both sides of the issue. We have and continue to provide multiple restroom facilities, attempting to accommodate both positions on the issue so all our students feel emotionally and physically safe." Larson says she wants more and says the law is not written for comfort.
They made the change with Ethan like that. No contact, they never called me or said anything to me, it was just done.
But since being told Monday he'd need to use a separate restroom, Stucker has not.
And I don't plan to, because I have every right to be treated the same as every other male student in there.
In Spirit Lake, Andrew Mullenbeck.
I think Ethan is a threat to nothing but injustice.
And the idea that this is something with two sides of an argument that both need to be respected is, I think, ludicrous.
Okay. All right.
By the way, the Florida Department of Education this week took down anti-bullying web pages from its website after a right-wing publication inquired about the pages.
Well, this was done by the wicked Governor Ron DeSantis.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Speaking of wicked, out in Bayport, Long Island, a guy named Robert Ferring, 74, was arrested for years of sending threatening letters to assault, shoot, and bomb LGBTQ-affiliated individuals, organizations, and businesses. A search of the home turned up hundreds of rounds of ammo, photos from a 2021 Pride event in East Meadow that he had stalked, and a stamped envelope addressed to an LGBTQ attorney containing the remains of a dead bird. And they say, we're sick. He had threatened to attack the 2021 Pride March with enough firepower to make the 2016 Orlando Pulse nightclub massacre look like a cakewalk. He especially went after David Kilmnick, who runs a lot of gay social services things out there, for like 6 years, and they didn't catch this guy.
8 years, 60 letters, and Kilmnick has been complaining about this, and they have done nothing about it until
He's also complaining that they let him out on a $100,000 bond. This guy is a menace, and
menace. He's a former teacher and coach and a band director.
Right, but I mean, again, like the kid in Michigan, they didn't do something with him, and he ended up shooting people. This guy gets out on bail. He's supposed to be under home confinement, but I wouldn't feel safe with him out.
Absolutely not.
Okay. In North Carolina, the homophobic, transphobic Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson is on the march. He's now doing speeches in churches promoting his anti-LGBTQ bigotry, sponsored by the Christian nationalist group, the American Renewal Project, it's called. They're not just looking to make Robinson governor, they're targeting city councils, county commissions, school boards. They want 30 of their pastors to run next year, all fighting what they call the false god of secularism.
And they've already had about a dozen meetings around the state with at least 100 pastors at each of these meetings. So I don't think they're going to have any trouble getting at least 30 pastors to run for office. They say Christian nationalism must reign supreme.
Right. All right.
I'm trying to get out of the sun again. Sorry.
Okay. from Kentucky, we got a report that a trans woman, Chris Blehar, Blehar, 65, was murdered back in May in Meade County, but only recently did a cousin reach out to the Human Rights Campaign to say that she was a member of the trans community. She was an Air Force vet, indicted in the case as an 18-year-old who will go on trial in June. The motive still unknown. This guy, Mr. Petty, stabbed and shot her. It is believed he worked for her. She lived all over the country and traveled the world working for Continental Airlines, and recently was buried with military honors, survived by her son, Maverick Thompson, and 2 grandchildren. That's the 49th violent death of a trans or non-binary woman, but she is the oldest.
And the 50th is a case in Oakland, California, where a trans woman, Nikki David, was shot dead. She was 33 years old. She was a model. She, as I say, is the 50th we've counted this year. We suspect there are more. Out of those 50, 44 have been BIPOC, 34 of them Black, and 30 of the 50 were under 30 years old.
Okay. In Tennessee, a 7th grader in Bedford County took his own life after relentless anti-gay bullying. Eli Fritchley was 12 years old. His peers kept telling him he was going to hell because of his sexuality. They mocked the way he dressed because he loved pink and painted his nails. Now would be the time for the so-called religious leaders to speak up and teach their flocks that they've been all wrong about homosexuality and gender variance, because this is what it leads to. And they should say that it's a grievous sin to bully anyone, no less a child, for being different. Eli's parents are now working on an anti-bullying foundation in his memory. The mother says we all failed him. It's as simple as that.
2 stories out of Georgia. First, trans woman Jenna Mitchell was a suicide 4 years ago at Valdosta State Prison. She had been housed with men. She was bipolar. Her family kept warning the prison that she was a danger to hurt herself. They did nothing. She committed suicide. The state has now reached a settlement of $2.2 million in a wrongful death lawsuit. And also in Georgia, you know those election workers who have been trashed by Trump by name, who are suing? Well, one of the entities they're suing is the Gateway Pundit, which is a publication, fake news publication, owned and run by a gay man. No, thank you.
And at Georgia Tech, the family of non-binary student Scout Schultz, who was shot dead by campus police back in 2017, sued, won a $1 million settlement in that case. Scout was mentally ill and they shot Scout anyway. So there you go.
In South Carolina, a federal court has told the state that they are misinterpreting the Supreme Court ruling of Philadelphia and the Catholic Adoption Agency. South Carolina wants to assert that they can fund religious adoption agencies because of that decision. And the federal court said, no, that was not the ruling in the case. That only had to do with Philadelphia's particular rules about exemptions from non-discrimination rules. You are wrong. And the lesbian parents who were rejected as adoptive parents or foster parents have a right to sue you for discrimination.
And I'm going to let you do this story about the Little House on the Prairie.
I do adore this story. And Andy, you found this story, so you get credit, but it is just classic. So we all know Little House on the Prairie, or those of us over a certain age know. And the books about little Laura Ingalls Wilder growing up on the Midwestern prairies. Well, it turns out that this Rose Wilder, the daughter of Laura Ingalls Wilder, was the actual author of the stories. And guess what? Rose seems to have been a lesbian. Now, we're talking early 20th century. Laura Ingalls Wilder told the stories. They were about her childhood. But Rose was the writer in the family, and she wrote these. And she, if you go back and look at the books, it turns out that the little girl was actually pretty butch and not gender conforming. And Rose, who wrote these, was an angry, repressed person. She had a lover, Helen Boynton, who was a Rhode Island nurse and who wrote the Sue Barton books about a lesbian nurse, also somewhat coded. But this is a whole new take on Little House on the Prairie, and quite thrilling as far as...
I wonder if the right wing is listening, and they do monitor the show, if they're going to start wanting to ban the Little House on the Prairie books.
Well, I suggest you go out and reread the Little House on the Prairie books. Okay. I think it's great news. And predictably, DaBaby, the rapper who was nasty to us at a concert in Houston, I think, is ghosting LGBTQ and HIV organizations after promising donations and apologies. No follow-up, no money, no nothing.
The Jussie Smollett trial is with the jury now, yes?
Yes.
And so we're
final arguments, I think, today.
I don't know what to say, except it's a complete mess. I mean, two completely different versions. You'll hear it, what the results are. Did he have sex with one of the guys? Did he not? Was it? It'll all be decided by the jury.
It's a toss-up. It's very impossible to tell who's telling the truth without being there in the courtroom and making your own mind up. So let's move on to international news.
All right. Well, we lost our friend Antony Sher this week, the out gay actor at the age of 72. There he is. We saw him in the play Primo, about Primo Levi, the Holocaust survivor that he wrote himself. But he was most famous, and there he is with his husband, Gregory Duran, who was the director of the Royal Shakespeare Company and directed Antony in tons of productions. They were the first couple to get a civil partnership in the United Kingdom, and they got back in 2005, and then they got married when it was legal in 2015. I saw him do Lear, Falstaff, Prospero Moore. Wonderful actor, South African and Jewish and gay, and he hid those things in the beginning when he moved to England, but he came out much about them and worked hard on all those causes, fighting apartheid and everything. And not mentioned is that he did a big AIDS movie called Alive and Kicking as an AIDS counselor having an affair with an angry young dancer with AIDS. You probably only have seen him in Shakespeare in Love briefly as the psychiatrist and as Disraeli with Judi Dench and Mrs. Brown. But great guy, did our show, and great activist.
Not every out actor will do Gay USA, and we were delighted to have him. In Canada, the House of Commons has passed a ban on conversion therapy. That's a national ban, which is more than we can say for the United States. So we're grateful and thank them and their members of the House of Commons congratulating each other after the vote.
A unanimous vote.
Unanimous vote. In Brazil, the Supreme Court has ordered an investigation of Bolsonaro for saying that the COVID vaccine increases people's vulnerability to HIV.
Okay. You're hearing a lot about the Ukraine these days. Well, this past week, and roll tape there, Rich, a gay bar in Kiev was swarmed by neo-Nazis shouting white power and death to the faggots. 20 of them overpowered the security guards outside, but the guards retreated inside, blocked them from entering. So then the neo-Nazis trashed the outside, smashed the windows before fleeing like rats. And these are the types that will welcome a Russian invasion.
We should note that this video is speeded up. People are not walking at that speed. 12 people were arrested, so at least the authorities are making some stab at looking like they're stopping it.
It's frightening.
It is. It's terrifying. and the people inside the bar were terrified and barricaded the doors and everything. Luckily, they did not get in. The Gay Games has put out a new logo and dates for Gay Games 11 in Hong Kong. I still think this is a very dicey proposition, but who knows? Maybe 2 years from now, Hong Kong will have returned to freedom. November 3rd to 11th, 2023.
Dream on. The Italian Olympics boxer Irma Testa has come out. Won bronze in Tokyo, won bronze in Rio in 2016, gold at the European Championships in 2019, and her success, she says, helped her come out publicly.
Now that Irma the athlete is secure, she said, Irma the woman can be sincere. 22 years old.
We told you about Sir Lewis Hamilton. I didn't realize he'd been knighted at the age of 36. The world's leading Formula One race car driver. Well, he wore pride colors for the second week in a row, this time in the Saudi Grand Prix, which he won after Qatar. Says he feels uncomfortable working in these places, knows that his impact is minimal, but he's trying to stand up for gay rights with rainbow colors on his helmet and speaking out and raising awareness. He hopes the kids back home in England will learn about the situation and study it and learn more about inclusivity. The Saudis have the death penalty for homosexuality. And by the way, so he's great. FIFA is having trouble finding sponsors for the Qatar Soccer World Cup in 22, partly over the oppression of women, gay, LGBTQ people, and migrant workers.
Not to mention working conditions and pay rates. So Lewis Hamilton won in Qatar, won in Saudi Arabia. Next week is Abu Dhabi, which is the finale of the year's races. So he's highly favored there. And
well, he's neck and neck with Max Verstappen.
Points, yes, but he's now won 2 races in a row, and he is the leading driver.
He'll be on
and he was not the only one to wear these rainbow colors. Other drivers, one wore a rainbow wristband, one wore a rainbow stripe on his shoe. So he is recruiting helpers along the way, which is terrific.
In Chile, the Senate passed the marriage equality bill, 21-8. There they are in the chamber. The Chamber of Deputies passed it 82-20. It goes to President Sebastián Piñera, who used to be against same-sex marriage, now is for it. It takes effect 90 days after the signing. First marriage is likely to be in March. Congratulations, Chile.
Not a traditionally conservative country. And another traditionally conservative country, Japan, which is not passing marriage equality, but now the city of Tokyo will offer or will study and presumably offer a same-sex partner system sometime next year. This is a big step forward for them.
And 6 Middle East nations have banned West Side Story due to the trans character, Anybody's, portrayed by non-binary actor there on the left, Iris Menas, M-E-N-A-S. The bans are in Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Qatar, Bahrain, Oman, and Kuwait. Disney would not agree to cuts to the movie.
Yes, thank you, Disney. All right, AIDS news. So last week was World AIDS Day, and we talked about some of the issues there. But one of the things that happened on World AIDS Day was that our old pal, Shep Wahnon, who you've heard us refer to on this show, if you're paying close attention, was asked to give a speech about his life at his synagogue, Congregation Bet Simchat Torah, here in New York. And he gave a very moving speech. And so we were so affected by it that we thought you would want to see it. Now, the thing about Shep is we sort of laughingly refer to Shep as the Zelig of the LGBTQ movement because he is everywhere. He's at every event. He's all over the world. He does everything. It is not an event if Shep is not there. So this will give you some idea of why Shep is everywhere.
It's an honor to do this, and I want to dedicate this to my big brother who died 33 years ago, whose yahrzeit is in 2 weeks, my brother Les. So this is my story. In early March 1981, my boyfriend John and I moved into the coolest neighborhood in the city, the East Village. We were both in our 20s and everything seemed perfect. We had been a couple for 4 years living on Long Island with our families. Moving to New York City seemed beshert for us, since I was from the projects in the Bronx and John was from Queens. It had only been 12 years since the Stonewall Uprising, when others, unknown to us, fought for our rights. It was a very exciting time to be young and gay and with a partner. It was our big adventure to reclaim the Big Apple as our own. But it was not meant to be. 2 months after living in New York, I received a phone call from my little brother David, telling me that our big brother Les had become an IV drug user. Les had always been very daring and prone to doing stupid stuff, but IV drugs didn't make sense. 2 months later, John and I and a few other gay friends were at Jones Beach, of course the gay section, when John showed me a small article in the New York Times about 41 young gay guys in San Francisco who died of mysterious causes. I brushed it off, saying, why should we in New York be concerned about a few gay guys in California? I later ate my words. My big brother using IV drugs and the little article in the New York Times were just the beginning for me. That article was to be the harbinger of an ongoing disaster for me, my family, and my community. What began as a trickle soon turned into a tsunami. There was a movie in the early 1980s called You Can't Stop the Music, stupid movie, starring the Village People and Steve Guttenberg about the disco craze. One of the lines was, you can't stop the music, nobody can stop the music. But soon enough, the music was stopped by an invisible, deadly virus. Shortly after that movie was released, young gay men who loved disco began to die. Okay. In 1986, I enrolled in a medical study that had nothing to do with AIDS. The people running the study contacted me to tell me there was something wrong with my platelets. You had to give a blood donation. I instinctively knew this was not going to be it was going to be a very big deal. I was too scared to actually take the HIV test, so I asked the doctor at the Community Health Project, the forerunner to Callan Lord, to test just my T cells. When I returned to the doctor, he said something like, with you being gay and having such a low T cell count, you have contracted AIDS, you have contracted HIV, the virus that causes AIDS. It's funny how the human brain works. When he first told me the bad news, I temporarily went deaf. Really, I didn't hear a word he said. When he repeated it, I understood and I was scared. I knew I had to keep this secret, even from John. I was ashamed of myself for allowing this to happen. No one must know. I thought maybe I can hold out until the cure, which is probably right around the corner. I cried all the way home, but I would never shed another tear along my journey with AIDS. But I decided I didn't want to die of denial, so I immediately started taking all the drugs to fight AIDS, AZT, DDI, DDC, many more. It was a heartbreaking time for the gay community. Some of us were infected, but all of us were affected. So many young gay guys, some of whom I knew and many I would never have the pleasure to know, were just disappearing. Death was stalking the gay community, but I remained silent out of fear for my own family, friends, community, and John. But I am proud to say that I was at the very first ACT UP demonstration on Wall Street on March 24th, 1987, but I still feel guilty for not allowing myself to get arrested. That would have been a good thing. Then everything changed when my big brother tested positive for AIDS in the summer of 1987. All those years I was watching my friends get AIDS and die, and I was infected, and now my big brother, good-looking and athletic, had it. For me, AIDS seemed to be everywhere. On New Year's Eve, 1988, my brother came down with pneumocystis carinii pneumonia, which is an opportunistic infection. At that point, I told my family that Les had crossed over to full-blown AIDS. In those days, an AIDS diagnosis meant you would be dead within a year and a half. Almost every weekend, my little brother and I visited our family. I told my brother to hang on. I would say things like, you don't want to be the last, you don't want to be the one who dies the day before the cure comes. Boy, was I off. It's been 40 years, and although there are great life-saving drugs, I take them, there's still no cure. Every week we visited my brother, and every week he deteriorated. In August, he had a series of mini strokes, leaving him unable to smile, speak, or even swallow. I had seen my friends die from AIDS, but not so upfront and personal as with my brother. I saw him wasting away at the age of 38, and I remembered how many of my gay friends had done the same. But it was never far from my thoughts that I, too, might go through it. It really was a very difficult time for me, grieving for my friends, watching my brother die, scared of my own health. When my brother died, 16 days before the first World AIDS Day on December 17, 1988, his yard site's in 2 weeks, he looked like a very old man, withered, silent. From the day he died until this very day, I've never gotten over his untimely death. But my next thought was, when would I be put to the test? Which continues. In the spring of 1994, I seemed to be falling asleep, lethargic, and unable to stand up even. My mother and my friends and John begged me to go to the hospital, but I was sure it was nothing. On the afternoon of May 11th, 1994, I collapsed in my apartment from anemia. I instinctively put my right arm in front of me to protect myself. That May 11th, John left work early that day, May 12th, to find me unconscious and in a coma. When he saw I was still breathing, he got me to nearby Cabrini Hospital. They put me on life support with only a 25% chance of living through the first night. My best friend, John Sharkey, saved my life. When I came to, the first thing I did was ask to speak to John. The nurse called him up. I spoke to him. He told me what had happened. But because I laid on my right arm for so long, I developed sepsis, which is a deadly bacterial blood infection. This was a perfect storm. To fight AIDS and sepsis at the same time seemed almost impossible. The doctors tried to save my life and my arm. Then I also lost the ability to walk, and I was developing kidney and liver failure. After 8 weeks, it was clear that my right arm could not be saved. The doctors gave me a choice: either have your right arm amputated, and you might live another 6 months, that might never walk again, or if you choose not to get amputated, you'll die soon. I have no idea why I hesitated, but I did. My decision to do the right thing and amputate was based on the old Jewish concept to choose life, any life, a disabled life, a short life, but life. I thought it might be a challenge becoming left-handed, but I adapted immediately. The first thing my left hand did was to sign the consent to amputate the right. Sometimes I would pray to God to save me. During 10 weeks in the hospital, I was overwhelmed by the number of people visiting. I said to myself many times, I will not give up, I will not give in. One lucky thing was that it was Stonewall 25 and gay games in New York, so I had many friends from all over the country visiting me. And one more page. But one visitor definitely stands out, and that was Rabbi Kleinbaum. I'll never forget her simple but powerful words. She said, "Shep, you are not your lost arm." I'm more than that. And as it turns out, I believe I am the long-time survivor of AIDS at CBST. I've been infected for 37 years. I believe I'm the only AIDS patient Rabbi Kleinbaum visited and held hands with and prayed with who is actually still alive. When I left the hospital, I had only 7 T cells and I weighed 96 pounds, not even a 98-pound weakling, less. I missed so many fabulous events during the summer in New York of 1994, like the Gay Games, the International Gay Square Dance Convention in Washington, D.C., and of course, Stonewall 25. I promised myself then and there that I would never miss another Gay Games, and I haven't. In fact, I won a gold medal in 2002 in Sydney. I would never miss another Square Dance Convention, and I haven't. Even though I missed Stonewall 25, I promised myself not only would I be there for Stonewall 50, but I would help to make it happen, and I did. 6 months after I got out of the hospital, which was the amount of time my doctors said I had to live, turned out to be my 43rd birthday. So amazingly, I didn't die. I now felt like I had a real chance to live out my life. Now every birthday I celebrate, I think about it as the day I cheated death and proved my doctors wrong. Through my whole ordeal, I never asked why me? Why not me? Good things happen to bad people all the time. But now, after all I went through, I do ask God, why me? Why was I spared? I do not have survivor's guilt. I do have survivor's responsibility. I feel responsible to tell my story and theirs. I try to honor them and remember the ones I knew. Maybe because so many of my friends died from AIDS, and I nearly died from it, I now live a life with more purpose and vigor and intentionality. I try to give back to the community that has supported me every step of the way as I was challenged by AIDS and fighting for my life. I try to give back by being active with the Gay Games, Gays Against Guns, the World Congress of GLBTQ, Sundance Outdoor Club, and of course this synagogue, Congregation Beit Simchat Torah. That goes on. So what did I learn? I thought about it and came up with a mnemonic, which got me through my experience with AIDS. It's FGH. F is for faith. I never gave up my faith in my doctors or in my God, in the universe or in my own will to live. G is for gratitude. No matter how bad things got, I always felt gratitude. There was a time in the hospital when I lost use of 3 of my 4 limbs. So even though I lost my arm, I was so grateful to get back the use of my legs. For me, the glass is not half empty or half full. For me, it is overflowing. And H is for humor. All through my ordeal, I was always making jokes about my disability and my situation, sometimes to make myself feel better and sometimes to put my friends at ease. I needed a little humor to get through the pain and the challenge. Of course, I learned to listen to my mother, my friends, and especially to John. I learned it the hard way. I learned that the gay community, especially including CBST and ACT UP and others, really did save my life. I learned life is fragile and precarious and precious. Grab as much as you can, as I do, and always have gratitude. No matter how bad things get, there's always something to feel gratitude for. I just have to have a shout out for 6 of my friends kind of came together with John as being the head of it. They were like a posse, and they interacted with the doctors, and they looked after me. And that's John Sharkey, Jackie Slivko, Martin Friedman, Bill Bolesky, who's recently died, and David Krause, and Mark Black over here. I'm so proud to be able to stand here after all I've been through and say that I beat AIDS. AIDS did not beat me. I won, AIDS lost. I'm a survivor. Well, that's my story. And act up, fight back, fight AIDS, and fight to live, as I did. That's it.
Wow. Thank you, Shep, for sharing that with everybody.
We love you, Shep. You're the greatest.
Yeah. And
He likes to call us Goosa.
and in terms of AIDS, the number of people living with with HIV decreased for the first time in New York City since tracking began. That was one of the statistics this week. But then you have Representative Ron Johnson, that wicked senator, Republican from Wisconsin, claiming that public health officials such as Fauci overhyped the AIDS pandemic, and they're overhyping COVID now. I mean, in each case, 750,000 plus people dying of these things. They're unbelievable. The new Republican talking point is more people have died of COVID under Biden than Trump. Because you're letting it get out of control, Republicans. You're not getting vaccinated.
Well, my favorite is Marjorie Taylor Greene saying, they don't close the schools for cancer. More people die of cancer. You idiot.
Let's move on. Should we go to entertainment news?
Well, just a couple of other AIDS notes. In terms of storytelling, and what Shep did, I think, was so important and so moving. ACT UP LA, the Los Angeles chapter, original members of the Los Angeles chapter, are starting their own oral history project, following up on the ACT UP Oral History Project here in New York. If you were a member of ACT UP LA and want to explore telling your story, get in touch with them. Look at their website, actupla.org. And also, I don't think we've talked about it, but we haven't really kept people up to date on this Cabenuva treatment, which is, instead of taking pills, you get shots periodically that have a couple of drugs. In the U.S., you get 2 shots in your rear end monthly. And some people are doing that, and they're doing a big advertising campaign for that. In the UK, the National Health Service has just announced that it will offer that treatment once every other month, which they seem to think will be effective. So we will try to follow more closely the alternative to pills.
All right, entertainment news. We've been tracking Amy Schneider, the big winner on Jeopardy. As Ann mentioned, she's off for a week while they have professors on. She's 42. She wrote on Twitter to any followers in Ohio, next year, no matter who the Republican candidate is, one of their goals will be to make my life harder, personally. Don't give them that chance. She got a shout out from Tim Ryan, who's running for the Democratic nomination. But she also talked about the fact that one of the things that triggered her coming out as transgender or recognizing herself was playing the role of Flute, one of the mechanicals in A Midsummer Night's Dream. Flute cross-dresses in the show. She did it as the character. She said, "This feels right to me." And that set her on her way.
She's the 4th biggest winner ever on Jeopardy. She'll be back for the show on December 20th. Set your DVRs. And there was something specific I wanted to get to. Where is it?
Well, I'll tell you more about Amy if you want. Her mom was a college professor who didn't let her leave the table unless something came up in the discussion that she didn't recognize and had to look it up in the dictionary or in the encyclopedia.
While you're tracking Amy Schneider, I've been tracking Christmas movies on all the channels. Well, Netflix has this new one, Single All the Way, that got a lot of press, starring Michael Urie. But one of the comments in one of the reviews was that Michael Urie has no real chemistry with the guy he ended up with, his best friend, which I have to say I agree with. I watched it. But the standout is Jennifer Coolidge, who's a standout in everything she's in as an ancillary. She's Aunt Sandy in this one. And my favorite, she's producing a local pageant, which is crazy, of course. And she has some weird accent, but my favorite quote of her in the movies is, "All the world's a stage, and most of us are desperately under-rehearsed." But in exploring this and others, I have discovered a whole new genre of lesbian Christmas rom-coms. This is an undiscovered river running through this. We've been talking about gay Christmas movies, which is code for men. But it turns out there are actually some lesbian storylines going on. We saw the Kristen Stewart one last year on Hulu that everyone got angry at because she ended up with the wrong woman. Everybody's still mad about that. But the woman she should have ended up with was played by Aubrey Plaza, who has now announced that they're going to do a spin-off starring her, which is very exciting to people. So that is something to look forward to. But there are a couple of current movies running from the last couple of years. One called Under the Christmas Tree, that suddenly a lesbian sister pops up flirting with someone else, and they end up together. And then there's one called Heart of the Holidays, where there are three sisters who were adopted, who all hate each other, and then they come back together, and there's a lot of racial diversity, and one of them turns out to be a lesbian, and the movie ends with her kissing her new girlfriend. There's stuff going on these Hallmark and Lifetime movies.
All right. I wonder if anyway. There's also stuff going on at the Kennedy Center.
Oh, wait a minute. That was the Adopted Sisters, Every Time a Bell Rings. Heart of the Holidays is the lesbian sister.
The Kennedy Center honors were taped over the weekend, I guess. They're going to be telecast by CBS on December 22. That's a Wednesday, I believe. Among the honorees, gay icon Bette Midler, who got her start at the Continental Gay Bathhouse in the early 1970s. She is shocked, she said, that they picked her because she basically engages in a lot of low humor, but she's a terrific performer. And a humanitarian, and you're going to see in her tribute Billy Porter come out of a clamshell to sing "From a Distance," one of her great songs. Other honorees are SNL's Lorne Michaels, Joni Mitchell, Motown's Berry Gordy, and opera bass baritone Justino Diaz.
Also, back to holiday romance movies, there's also a queer Latinx, although Latinx is now a term under dispute, movie coming up on Amazon Prime on December 17th called With Love. It's actually a 5-episode series, so that will be a new path in the genre.
And Ann and I went to see The Lost Daughter, the directorial debut of Maggie Gyllenhaal. Now it stars Olivia Colman as a professor on a vacation in Greece. Motherhood theme is very prominent in it. She encounters Dakota Johnson, a young mother, and we see Olivia as a young mother, played by Jessie Buckley. I found it very absorbing. It kept me quite off balance.
I was less absorbed because it didn't move me in the way I like to be moved. It is from an Elena Ferrante novel. Elena Ferrante is the author of the 4-book series, the Neapolitan novels, starting with My Brilliant Friend, 2 novels of which have been turned into movies that have run on HBO. I eagerly await 3 and 4. So I'm an Elena Ferrante fan, but this one's a little stark. And Maggie Gyllenhaal in the talk back afterwards said as much in talking about, do you remember how she put it? The sort of raw, honest, unsettling themes in this movie.
What I most remember is, of course, Dakota there, who was sitting next to her, saying she is such a terrific director. It's her first outing as a director. So many men, especially, are bullies on sets when they direct, and she just whispers in your ear and gets the best thing out of you, and you don't have to do it by hectoring people and embarrassing them in front of the whole cast. And of course, that's her husband over there on the right.
Maggie's husband.
Maggie's husband, of course.
Peter Sarsgaard.
Correct. Very bad on names.
And Olivia Colman looming over them, zooming in from London there.
So I thought that the whole thing, that part of it was very admirable. And Ed Harris is in the movie too.
I loved the talkback. That was, for me, a little more entertaining than the movie. Oh, I found the note I was looking for. You talked about us following Amy Schneider on Jeopardy. We've also been following that HBO series, We're Here, about Shangela, Bob, and Eureka, the drag queens going to small towns around America. Well, it turns out that that caused a real problem in one town, Evansville, Indiana, because one of the characters was a local Methodist pastor who is straight and cis, but who did drag in their show to support his pansexual daughter. Well, now he's been forced out of his job in the local Methodist church there.
There's conflicting reports. He's definitely leaving, I think in February or January or February or something like that, but it's an unhappy situation.
Constructively fired would be, I think, the appropriate phrase.
Is this what Jesus wants?
Exactly.
All right.
I think what Jesus wants is the Ballet Trocadero de Monte Carlo at the Joyce Theater, December 14th through January 2nd. You can get your tickets there.
And Jackie Rudin, another of our great viewers, tells us that Justin Elizabeth Sayre, now called Jess, Jes, has a wonderful show at La Mama in the East Village, December 9th through the 12th, called To Build a Soul. And Jackie also alerts us to the fact that the infamous show The Meeting is back at Joe's Pub on a monthly basis starting January 9th.
And we are interested to see that on The Voice, a young trans man, Sasha Allen, and his father, who performed, that's Sasha on the right and the dad on the left, they're performing on The Voice. There have been a couple of other trans performers on The Voice, competitors, but this duo with Sasha are the first to crack the top 8 on The Voice. So that's a...
And Sasha's very proud of all the trans kids that are now watching. RuPaul's Drag Race will have 2 trans competitors and a cis straight queen for the first time, premiering in a month, season 14.
And congratulations to actor Julian Morris, who came out. He's been with his partner for 18 years. Thank you for coming out, Julian. You know him from Gone Girl, Pretty Little Liars, The Morning Show, and The Good Fight.
And there's going to be another gay opera at the Met. Maybe are we out of time? I could tell you.
We have a few seconds.
Well, it's going to be based on Emile Griffith. Going to be by Terence Blanchard. Emile Griffith, who was gay and actually killed a man who, killed
Benny Perret in the ring when Benny was yelling homophobic slurs at him.
Right. So, what a news week. We will hope to see you next week.
Good night.
Bye.